Established in 2002, the African Union Peace and Security Council emerged from the need to address conflicts and crises plaguing the continent. During the official launch in May 2004, African leaders highlighted the Peace and Security Council's potential importance, stating that the establishment of the Peace and Security Council marks an historic watershed in Africa's progress towards resolving its conflicts and the building of a durable peace and security order. Since its operationalization in March 2004, the Peace and Security Council has made various efforts to address crises and conflicts across the continent. So today, after 20 years of its operationalization, how does the Peace and Security Council fare in preventing and resolving conflicts and crises of the continent? This is Amani Africa Dispatch, our videocast on current political, governance, and peace and security affairs of continental and multilateral policy importance. The Council's first major tests came with the crisis in Darfur, Sudan. Darfur was the first of conflict situations that featured on the agenda of the Peace and Security Council when the Peace and Security Council became operational in March 2004. It's also here, with respect to the conflict in Darfur, that the Peace and Security Council deployed various conflict management and resolution tools.
Darfur, where the continuous spectacle of men and women and children driven from their homes by murder, rape, and burning of their villages makes a mockery of our claim as an international community to shield people from the worst abuses.
In 2004, the African Union took action to address the crisis in Darfur. Mediation talks, led by the African Union, culminated in the signing of the humanitarian ceasefire agreement in N'Djamena, Chad, on 8 April. The first peace support operation that the Peace and Security Council deployed was the African Union mission in Sudan, that provided the first international presence in Darfur, contributing to reduction of violence against civilians. The mission started in 2004 with 60 military observers and 300 troops, later expanding to 7,000 troops by 2006. Despite being confronted with a limited mandate, insufficient troops, a lack of political will, and inadequate equipment, the mission was successful in reducing violence. Through strategic negotiations, it also managed to prevent certain attacks from occurring. The African Union mission in Sudan also laid the groundwork to the first United Nations co-partnership with the regional organization, leading to the historic joint UN and AU mission known as African Union-United Nations Hybrid Operation in Darfur. It is also here in Darfur that the Peace and Security Council for the first time established a high-level panel, the African Union High-Level Panel on Darfur, which later became the African Union High-Level Panel on Sudan, setting an example for the High-Level Panel as a model of African Union's diplomatic action for mediation and peacemaking. Fast forward to today, Sudan once again finds itself in turmoil, following the war that broke out on 15 April 2023 between the Sudan Armed Force and the paramilitary Rapid Support Force. Almost 14,000 fatalities have been recorded since April 2023, with about 10 million Sudanese displaced and over 24 million people in need of humanitarian aid. Recent data also shows that a large number of people face imminent famine. Despite its early engagement in subsequent months, it lost momentum and dented its credibility as it failed to mobilize effective response to the situation in Sudan. Unable to bridge the widening gulf between people's expectation of it and its actual delivery, the African Union ran into a serious legitimacy crisis.
Council further decides that should the transition military council fail to hand over power to a civilian-led transitional authority without any further delay, Council will automatically impose punitive measures on individuals and entities that are obstructing the establishment of a civilian-led transitional authority.
Despite the plight of Sudanese civilians caught up in the destructive war and the African Union's claim for leadership, the Peace and Security Council and the African Union in general did not go beyond expression of concern and condemnation of breaches of violations of human rights and international humanitarian law. It took 8 months for the Peace and Security Council to stand its ground and adopt a decision on the establishment of a high-level ad hoc panel meant to work on a full-time basis on the situation on Sudan. While this is a welcome development, it will be an uphill battle for the panel to make up for the lost time and regain AU's credibility on Sudan file. Reflecting on the Peace and Security Council's efforts following its launch in 2004, it has established itself as a leading side of peace and security policy making. Since its engagement in Darfur and early months of its operationalization, it mobilized various credible, some even landmark responses to conflicts and crises on the continent. It did so through the use of preventive diplomacy, mediation and peacekeeping, deployment of peace support operations, and suspension in cases of unconstitutional changes of government. Today, with conflicts involving terrorist groups proliferating, 8 successful military coups since 2021, and 6 of the African Union member states under suspension, and Sudan experiencing a state collapse and mass atrocities, the Peace and Security Council is facing legitimate charges of failing to muster effective leadership and falling back to the old politics of indifference to mass atrocities that was the characteristic of the now defunct African Union's predecessor, the Organization of African Unity. As the Peace and Security Council contemplates its past triumphs and setbacks, the lessons learned from Darfur and other efforts must guide future endeavors to restore its effectiveness and credibility. It owes this to its founding commitment and its future relevance. The people of Africa, including Sudanese and Congolese enduring enormous suffering on account of failing peace efforts, deserve nothing less. This is Amani Africa Dispatch.